इस देश को संभाल लेना, वरना 75 साल बाद
मुझे हार्ट हो रहा है बिग बॉस, मुझे हार्ट हो रहा है, हार्ट हो रहा है, मुझे हार्ट हो रहा है।
So where did this whole frenzy actually kick off? Well, on May 15th, a hearing at the Supreme Court inadvertently lit a match in this high-pressure environment. Chief Justice Surya Kant compared unemployed young people engaged in digital activism to cockroaches and parasites who attack institutional frameworks. To a generation already facing high administrative barriers and exam leaks, this wasn't an isolated comment. It became a symbol of institutional elitism that demanded a response. Within 48 hours, former strategist Abhijit Dipke weaponized that insult to launch the satirical Cockroach Janta Party, or CJP. The party adopted the motto, secular, socialist, democratic, lazy, effectively reclaiming the parasite label as a badge of resilience. Numbers at this scale require an explanation. While a meme page can go viral on humor, a structured organization converting views into hundreds of thousands of formal registrations represents a modern mechanism of counter-hegemonic political mobilization. Naturally, the very next day, the Supreme Court issues a formal clarification asserting that the Chief Justice was misquoted. The statement emphasized that his comments were strictly targeting individuals who were entering professional fields using fake academic degrees, not just the general youth or legitimate activists. However, as we all know, in the world of rapid digital communication, that initial quote had already taken on a complete life of its own. Retroactively changing the definition of the target group, the defense attempts to manage public outrage. This relies on equivocation and moving the goalposts. Rather than rejecting the new definition, the CJP weaponized it. They took this fake degree metric and used it to sarcastically defend the Prime Minister, whose academic credentials are a subject of frequent political debate. Dipke released a statement saying, "I have my differences with the PM, but I believe the CJI has no right to insult him." Not having a legitimate degree does not give anyone the right to call fellow citizens parasites. This tactical subversion trapped establishment critics in an impossible position. They were forced to either defend the Prime Minister's educational history or agree with the Chief Justice's parasite label. Now, looking at the sheer speed of this, your very first instinct might be to suspect some massive, highly funded, coordinated conspiracy. Because who could possibly mobilize a party in just 48 hours, right? Well, the data grounds us here. The CJP was actually launched by a single individual, Abhijit Dipke. He's a 30-year-old public relations postgraduate student at Boston University and a former social media strategist for the Aam Aadmi Party. It's actually a brilliant illustration of the power of modern digital literacy. You really don't need a sprawling underground network anymore. You just need one person who deeply, fundamentally understands PR and social media. And I gotta say, the PR strategy here was absolutely fascinating. The CJP proudly declared themselves the voice of the lazy and unemployed, with an official motto of secular, socialist, democratic, lazy. It's pure genius, honestly. They took that heavy institutional insult, being called lazy parasites and cockroaches, and completely reclaimed it. By wearing those exact terms as a badge of resilience, they totally disarmed the original attack. Because, think about it, you just can't effectively insult someone who is already proudly waving your insult around on their own banner. But before we get too lost in the brilliant satire of it all, we kind of hit a wall of cold, hard reality. 29%. The CGP wasn't just a funny internet joke born out of thin air. That 29% represents the staggering graduate unemployment rate at the time. This is the concrete empirical data that served as the real-world catalyst for the whole movement. Because when nearly a third of educated youth literally can't find jobs, a satirical party for the lazy and unemployed suddenly stops being just a joke, doesn't it? It becomes a highly accurate reflection of genuine socioeconomic despair. And, it wasn't just unemployment fueling this fire. The socioeconomic anxieties pushing this movement forward ran incredibly deep. Right alongside that 29% unemployment, people were dealing with rampant paper leaks in highly competitive entrance exams like NEET. We saw soaring administrative barriers like those exorbitant CBSE rechecking fees. There were clear, desperate demands for institutional accountability and gender representation. Realizing all of this helps us see the bigger picture. This entire movement was always about systemic administrative failures. The satire was just the vehicle. The ultimate destination was systemic reform. Because the establishment could not arrest a joke, they attempted to dismantle its logic, beginning a conflict fought primarily through logical fallacies, claiming the CJP was a covert partisan plant operated by the Aam Aadmi Party to undermine the ruling administration. This diagram shows the structure of that claim. Supporters of this theory point to a single data point, Abhijit Dipke's employment history as an Aam Aadmi Party social media strategist from 2020 to 2023. This structure is a genetic fallacy. It judges the validity and independent significance of the CJP based only on the historical origin of its creator, ignoring the current function of the platform. It also relies on post hoc ergo propter hoc. Critics assume that because Dipke worked for Aam Aadmi Party first, the CJP must be a continuation of that specific partisan agenda. This chronological assumption bypasses the actual trigger for the movement's creation, the Chief Justice's courtroom remarks on May 15th. By focusing strictly on the founder's past, institutional powers avoid addressing why hundreds of thousands of independent citizens joined the cause. A secondary narrative framed the CJP as a highly structured, opposition-funded toolkit. This claim gained traction after prominent opposition figures, such as Samajwadi Party chief Akhilesh Yadav, opportunistically interacted with the trend online. This logic diagram charts the error, taking a few isolated social media posts and extrapolating them into proof of massive structural coordination. In logic, this is a hasty generalization. Critics then compounded this with a straw man fallacy. The CJP's satirical demands for constitutional reforms, like banning post-retirement positions for judges, were misrepresented as a coordinated attempt to destroy public faith in national institutions. Finally, a third narrative linked the CJP's online humor to violent regime collapses recently seen in neighboring South Asian countries. It also creates a straw man. Critics took the CJP's 5-point manifesto, which asked for specific constitutional reforms, and watched them morph into an effigy of regime-toppling insurrection. By reframing satirical critiques as subversion, critics avoid addressing the economic frustration and youth unemployment that fueled the movement. The digital activists were also capable of deploying bad logic when pressured. As the CJP grew, journalists pressed the leadership for answers regarding their operational security, their political alignments, and social media manipulation. When confronted with questions about hacking attempts and internal security, Dipke responded by demanding to know why the government was silent on Chinese border incursions and why the Prime Minister does not hold open press conferences. By injecting emotive but irrelevant issues into the dialogue, Dipke diverted attention away from valid scrutiny of his own organization. This is a red herring. It also relies on an appeal to hypocrisy, or tu quoque. The defense asserts that the CJP does not have to answer for its own lack of transparency simply because the state apparatus also lacks transparency. Highlighting the failures of the state may score rhetorical points online, but it does not logically validate the movement's own internal operations. This realization led to the immediate creation of rival entities, most notably the National Parasitic Front, which positioned itself as the hyper-satirical opposition to the CJP. While the CJP leveraged humor to demand institutional accountability, the NPF targeted the broader culture of political theater by proposing absurd policies like integrating municipal accountability with Google Maps. Once the initial dam of institutional authority breaks, a floodgate opens, allowing multiple factions to occupy and gamify the digital political landscape. This flowchart illustrates the core structural lesson of the CJP. When systemic frictions like mass unemployment and administrative blockades are met with institutional derision, they will inevitably bypass traditional debate. As our fallacy mapping shows, institutional powers consistently deploy logical deflections rather than addressing the economic claims driving these movements. In contemporary digital activism, mastering the formal logic of rhetorical subversion serves as a primary engine for modern political warfare.
To really understand the CJP, we have to understand the concept of rhetorical subversion. The establishment's initial comment was essentially an ad hominem logical fallacy. They attacked the character of the youth by calling them parasites, rather than addressing their actual arguments or the systemic issues they face. The CJP tactically reclaimed that exact ad hominem attack and wore it as a badge of resilience. By doing this, the activists completely disempowered the original attacker. Think about it. When you hurl a logical fallacy at someone and they immediately go out and print proud parasite on a t-shirt, your original insult loses all of its intended sting. It just totally bypasses traditional logical debate. And the empirical footprint of this strategy? Absolutely staggering. By May 21st, 2026, which is just days after that initial Supreme Court hearing, the Cockroach Janta party hit a milestone of 10 million followers. 10 million! All achieved through the core strategy of reclaiming an ad hominem insult via satire. Meanwhile, their purely absurdist opposition, the NPF, experienced massive rapid growth right alongside them. Which brings us to the core takeaway of this entire explainer. When a satirical movement built entirely on an insect pun can mobilize 10 million citizens faster than most traditional political campaigns, we really have to ask ourselves, as digital subversion reaches these massive, unprecedented scales, is governance as theater the new reality for political accountability? Have traditional methods of protest been permanently replaced by algorithmic satire? It is a fascinating question that both the establishment and the electorate are absolutely going to have to answer in the years to come. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.
इस देश को संभाल लेना, वरना 75 साल बाद